Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be talking about Cuckoo, directed by Tilman Singer, starring of course Hunter Schafer, Jessica Henwick, and Dan Stevens. And we've got a weird one on our hands here. This is a very bizarre horror mystery thriller, I will call it, that is extremely strange. I think it's one of those movies that you're either going to walk into and say, what the fuck did I just watch? I really need to watch that again, or what the fuck did I just watch? I really wish I did not see this movie at all. You're gonna have one of those two reactions, and hardly anything will be in between. And I will have to tend to agree to the pull quotes that are in the trailer saying that this is a deviously fun body horror movie that is extremely terrifying for a lot of it. I think that's, I mostly agree with these sentiments that were in the trailer because, it's a very vague trailer. You don't really know what to expect going into it because this movie is extremely strange. And so of course I do want to get into spoilers for this movie. So if you have not had a chance to see Cuckoo yet in theaters and you are down for that trailer and you're into, experimenting with something that is going to be truly bizarre and you have an open mind, I would recommend this movie for you. Although, again, with a lot of the movies I've been talking here on the channel, like Trap and like Long Legs specifically, another neon horror film, this movie's not going to be for everyone. So what is this film about? Well, essentially follows Hunter Schafer's character, who is in a situation that she does not want to be in whatsoever. Her father and her stepmother are moving to this new resort as, I think architects of building a new resort for Dan Stevens' character, who owns this entire place, and she's, forcefully being sent there because something happened to her mom. We don't really know exactly what happened. I'm sure you can predict it. Her mom died in the past, and so she is now stuck in a living situation with her father, her stepmother, who she doesn't really care for all that much, and her, stepsister, who she hardly even wants to call her sister. And so she's very much stuck in this situation that she just wants to run away from. But what makes matters worse is that things in this weird resort town are very much not what they seem like. There's a weird, creepy something or another that is running through the streets of this town that is absolutely just horrifying, and you don't know what it is. And there's weird, like, time loopy type of elements in this movie that I was really not expecting whatsoever from the concept of this movie. Like I said, it is a horror mystery. I think the mystery for sure is the main, pull of this movie throughout the first 2/3 of the film. And once that mystery is unraveled, then it becomes almost a weird, sci-fi horror type of thing, which again was not really pitched into the trailer, but it is very much an element into this film. And so I think the best way to go about reviewing this movie with spoilers is to talk about the concept and what the explanations of things are that are revealed at the end of the film first here in the review, and then we'll get into the more character-based stuff a little bit later on. So what is the Cuckoo creature? Is that what we're calling it? Is it a creature of sorts? It's some ancient being essentially that Dan Stevens' character is, he's a nature preserver. He wants to preserve, this nature. He has this resort here for people to enjoy this nature, but what's also belongs in this nature is what they compare to a cuckoo bird, is some ancient being essentially that is, that they're essentially breeding between different people. The metaphor that Dan Stevens basically uses in this film is the reason why it is called Cuckoo is if you have a cuckoo bird, it will lay its eggs in the nest of other species birds, and so that bird will then grow up in a different family's nest and be raised by those birds, and then will eventually go on to do the same thing. And it is basically an imposter amongst other people. And so that is what this cuckoo woman is. She's this ancient being that is, letting her seed be implanted into other, people that are visiting this resort, other, honeymoon couples. And once they have their child, they're eventually brought back to this resort. And this, this child will eventually become another mother to, keep on the breeding process of making these new cuckoo creatures. Now, these creatures of sorts, they are definitely humanoid. They have a normal human form, but, they are just off in general. You get a lot of shots in the first, 2/3 of this movie that just kind of show them a little bit out of focus. Their eyes are glowing red. They clearly are, dressed up in a way to kind of, hide what they really look like. They have these glasses on, even though those red piercing eyes are kind of going through these sunglasses. They have a wig on that you see later on is explored in the film, and they're, wearing this big trench coat jacket type of thing. And so for the first 2/3 of the movie, I thought this thing was absolutely horrifying because you don't know what it is. And I thought that element of the mystery of this film really did work because you didn't really know what this thing was, and you're waiting for some revelation to figure out what it actually is. And once that does come, we'll get into how I think it did become a little less scary once you found these things out, but the journey of the film is still very much terrifying as you're living through it. Another element of the cuckoo in this film is that it can essentially create a time loop for these characters, which is how it gets close enough to its victims to kill them, which I think is a fascinating concept. And I actually had a conversation with a friend just not even too long ago where I think that genuinely every time loop type of movie is great. I don't think there's a single time loop movie that I don't like. Comment down below if you you've seen a time loop movie that you don't like. I love Palm Springs, I love Groundhog Day, I love, Edge of Tomorrow, all those sort of things. The concept is brilliant, and this one is very different. It's not the sort of thing where a character is stuck living the same day over and over again, but essentially this cuckoo creature will have its scream. It'll like shriek into the air, and everybody who hears this, creature shrieking will essentially freeze in time, where they'll like start to live certain things. There's a scene where Hunter Schafer is playing the guitar, and she sees that her sister is behind her, and she takes off her headphones and goes to see why her sister is having this seizure, and then all of a sudden it reverts back, and she's right there once again playing the guitar. She takes off her headphones and sees that her sister is seizing behind her, and it's a weird little loop where you get to see that several times, and it's the first situation where you get to see this happen. And basically what's happening, I guess, as it's, portrayed at the end of the film, is if you're able to hear this cuckoo's screech, you're essentially stuck in that moment. And as you're stuck in that moment physically, in time, just essentially having a seizure, you're basically reliving whatever you were just doing, and that allows the creature, the cuckoo, to get closer enough to you to actually kill you, to essentially trap you in place as it gets closer and closer. And I absolutely love this concept. I think the things in this movie that I think I was drawn most to is the mystery aspect of what this creature is, and the explanation, and the weird sci-fi elements of this weird time loop thing, I think is really unique and original and just really brilliant in how it was portrayed, because again, that drawing mystery really, like, it lures you in and it terrifies you. And there's a lot of moments. One of the greatest jump scares in this movie is also featured in the trailer, which I forgot that it was in the trailer, and so it still really did get me, is you see the cuckoo kind of reach around the corner, you see it's all of a sudden jump cuts closer to you, and it is absolutely horrifying. I think it's one of the most effective scares in this film, and it's moments like that I think this concept absolutely thrives. And so the originality of this film and the concept within the actual story at hand is probably what drew me to enjoying this movie, probably more than I imagine most people will see. I think a lot of people will be very confused in how convoluted it is of how they explain all these things. I think this is the reason why I desperately want to see this movie again, because when you're getting the explanations towards the end of the film, I was in an empty theater, so I was able to, take my phone out and take notes, try to, I guess comprehend that everything that was happening in this film. And I think if you're in an audience, I think a lot of this exposition at the end of the film can be extremely overwhelming, and I think that will turn a lot of people off. And so I think it does get very convoluted, especially when it comes to those explanations in the third act. But if you can hang on to the ride that this movie is taking you on, and you just hold tight, I think that you can go through this journey and be very entertained by the deliciously, bloody and gory stuff that happens in the third act. But let's get into the characters of this film, starting of course with Hunter Schafer as the star of this film as Gretchen. And honestly, I hadn't really seen her in anything before this. I know she was in Kinds of Kindness very briefly earlier this year, which great movie. I have a review out for that here on the channel as well. But you don't really get a lot of moments with her in that film really at all, and I hadn't seen Euphoria yet, so I was really curious to see how she'd handle starring in a horror thriller like this. And I think she makes a really great scream queen, and I think the character itself kind of holds you at an arm's length for the majority of this movie, which makes her, I guess, not necessarily the most relatable character. And some of these story elements with this character is a little bit cliched, especially when it comes to the mother. Of course, when you have her mother out of the picture from the very start of this movie, it's very easy to predict that her mother is probably dead. She's leaving messages to her on the voicemail, and she's hearing her mom's voice, and that's been a trope in so many movies that I can just think of off the top of my head, where it's like, yeah, you're just you're calling this number just to hear that voicemail, and you're leaving a message because you can't talk to her anymore. But even if some of these storylines are cliched, I still think that Hunter Schafer was good in the role, and all her connections with everybody else in this resort was interesting enough to make me keep being drawn to this character. But I think that her relationship with Alma, her stepsister, was easily the most interesting in the film. Alma is mute from the very beginning of the film, so she has no real way of communicating directly to her sister, so there's already a communication barrier between these two characters, which makes them a little bit harder to, I guess, become friends very easily in this film. And of course, there's the age difference too between these two characters, and so she really has no reason to relate to this little girl at the beginning of the story. And the entire arc that you have of her essentially accepting the situation with her mom. It's like, yes, my mom is dead, I'm now in this situation, I need to accept the new family that I have and this new sister that I have. That's essentially the arc that this character is going to be on, and I found that arc to be very much present, but it had a lot more weight in the ending of the film, where I don't think that it quite earned the emotional moment towards the end of it, even though it did, strike me emotionally a lot more than I thought it was going to be. I don't think that arc was, I guess, as clear throughout the entirety of the movie, because you only get a couple moments to see these two characters bond, obviously, at the very beginning of the movie where they're kind of struggling to communicate and don't really know how to interact with each other. And there's a midpoint in the movie where, this sister is having these seizures and she doesn't really know what's happening with her. And, she thinks that music will help her. But obviously, the family doesn't want music because music is something that's going to cover her ears, which obviously Dan Stevens' character does not want any of that to be, put upon the sister. And so you get a little bonding moment there. But the real bonding moment is in the voice messages. She is in the room next to Hunter Schafer's, and so she hears her always leaving messages to her mom and missing her mom very much, and she doesn't really understand that her mom is dead. She does not know that, and so she also decides to leave a message on the phone for her mother, and just essentially trying to get her to come visit her sister because she knows that she misses her very much. And I really love this voice message in general because I thought it was extremely sweet, and it really, gets into the heart of this character because, yes, Alma is one of these cuckoo creatures that is being bred by, the Dan Stevens weird, creepy scientist type of storyline in this film. And so there's so many reasons why this character should push her away and say, you are the problem, you are the villain of this story, you are this terrifying creature that we really should not keep alive. But it's that heart of this character. It's like, if you grow up in a situation with people that love you, that surround you, maybe you can't, grow up to be a very bad thing. So there's very much a type of, nurture versus nature storyline in this film that I thought was interesting, that I wish they got into more of in this film, with just making that storyline a little bit more of the centered storyline in this film. And so when you get to the end of the film, I think it holds to the strongest moments in the entire film at large, which is, of course, the moment where Hunter Schafer actually apologizes to Alma, and they actually have a bond and a connection at that moment. And this moment actually sparked a theory of mine as I was watching the film, because the shots where Gretchen reaches out to Alma very much mirrored the shots of the hooded woman or the cuckoo reaching out to any of its victims. This shot of, a character reaching out towards camera to grab the hand of somebody else, or in the case of the hooded woman to like reach out with this weird goo type thing to its victims. Very gross and disgusting, but that shot did mirror that of the shot in the ending. And this sparked a theory of mine that maybe the actress playing this hooded woman is the same actress who was in the photos as Gretchen's mother. And if that is the case, I think that really makes a really interesting thematic tie between Gretchen and her mother, and Gretchen dealing with this hooded woman as the villain of this story and having to get over the death of her mother and having to, I guess, reconcile with that and to face her fears or face the trauma that she has, dealt with in the past and now in the present. If that is the case, I absolutely love that. And if that's not the case, massive missed opportunity to not cast the same actress in both of those roles, because I think it adds a lot thematically. I think that's something that if you notice on second or third watch, that's really cool. If I caught that on first watch, I'm actually really excited about that. But if I'm actually just making stuff up here, that'd be really funny. But I guess thematically, that is how I saw that moment. But either way, I think the journey between Gretchen and Alma coming together at the end of this movie wasn't maybe as smooth as it could have been. But I think that the emotional moment in that moment, and I guess the performance from Hunter Schafer particularly, was really great. But even more so, I love the fact that these two characters need to get out of this situation. You have two other characters that I haven't really gotten into. You have the detective character, who I'll get into in a second. You have Dan Stevens, who I'll also get into in a second. But essentially, this detective made a promise to Hunter Schafer because, he was not able to protect his wife, and so he made that same promise to Hunter Schafer, and he does not want that promise to be broken because he feels like he wasn't able to do that for his wife. And so this detective doesn't want to hurt Hunter Schafer, but he does want to kill Alma because he sees the cuckoos as something that should not be able to escape from this facility, from this resort. He wants to wipe them all out. And on the other hand, you have Dan Stevens' character who, wants to breed these creatures. He very much has a connection to Alma and wants her to go on, because if she dies, then that goes your entire experiment. There goes your preservation of whatever this monster is that you're trying to breed and trying to groom throughout this entire story. And of course, he wants to kill Hunter Schafer because she's the one who threatens this entire thing for, this story to get out, to destroy everything that he had done, to, take this, Alma character out of the facility into her own hands. And so he wants to kill Hunter Schafer's character. And so they're essentially hugging in the middle between these two as they're pointing guns at each other, trying to get out of the situation, using each other as human shields. And I found this moment to be really intense. I love the framing of this. I love how it looked. I really love the cinematography in this movie in general, but I love the idea of them hugging each other, finally having accepted one another and being each other's shield to protect each other from the opposite, force that is pointing guns at each other. And of course, the concept of the scream comes back into play because Alma does her cuckoo scream, covering Hunter Schafer's ears to get them stuck in time so they can get out of this situation. And in their eyes, they're, having these seizures, they're reliving this moment over and over again until all of a sudden Hunter Schafer and Alma vanish from the situation, and they're now pointing guns at each other, and you hear them both pull the trigger, and they essentially kill each other at the end of this film. again, I think the sci-fi concept of how they're dealing with all these storylines is really, really interesting. I eat that stuff up. If it's a little bit too convoluted for you, I get it. If it's, you know, a little bit, I guess, it kept you as an audience member at an arm's length, I understand that. But for me, I ate that up. And I'll be honest, I don't think I really cared too much about this detective character. Of course, he was kind of the character that you got to see in flashbacks of his wife dying and he wasn't able to protect her. And the other, you know, creature, I believe his daughter is the one that's been running around in this film that Hunter Schafer eventually kills. And so, yeah, sure. Oh, no, I don't think Hunter Schafer. I think he actually kills her himself. I think that maybe was his daughter. Honestly, I'm not sure. That's one of those moments that I need to rewatch this film just to kind of clear up some of those story points in this film. But either way, I didn't really feel too much of a great connection with this detective character, and I feel like there could have been a little bit more development for him. Then there was the Dan Stevens character, who I love Dan Stevens. If you have not seen Legion, one of my favorite shows ever. I've been dying to rewatch it, especially since Dan Stevens has been popping up in a bunch of different films recently. He's just been popping up in these weird little kooky roles, and he's perfect for these weird kooky roles. You can tell that he is only really picking roles where he can just have fun and play in, and that's very much what he does in this role. He's weird, he's kind of creepy, he speaks in a really goofy accent, and he's just exactly what you'd expect for Dan Stevens to be in a film called Cuckoo. He's very much a crazy, just mad scientist type of character who is very strange. And so those two characters I don't think I had as much of a connection to, but I think they serve their purpose enough in this story to make it at least an entertaining moment to see them going against each other at the ending of this film. And then you have some of the other elements. You have this other woman who is a guest at the resort that kind of had a romance spark between her and Hunter Schafer's character, who wanted to run away with them. And so yeah, sure, there was that storyline. Again, I didn't really learn too much about this other character, so I didn't really have a connection to her. And then there's the other woman who also worked at this resort who, you know, was running off with the cop to have like an affair with him or whatever was going on in that entire situation. I didn't really care about that storyline either. And so, yes, there are a lot of different, you know, disparate parts of this entire film that kind of feel disconnected. And I think that's probably my biggest issue with this film, which is, I guess, the way this movie flows. It almost feels like each scene kind of just fades away into the next one without the connective tissue to really make it seem like it flows naturally. I felt that's really from the beginning of the film. There's very much where you feel like you're at one moment, you're in one scene, and all of a sudden there's something that happens, and then it kind of skips forward in time, and now you're in a completely different scene, and you didn't really get to see how we got from point A to point B. It just kind of skipped over something, and that's kind of how the entire movie feels until you get to the ending of the film, where then you're not skipping around through time, you're not trying to hide information, you're just kind of experiencing the film as it is. And so I do think that the first 2/3, as great as the mystery was, I do think it kind of felt strung together very loosely until you got to the revelations. And so, yeah, sure, I think that the way this movie is paced and the way it's structured is a little bit off-putting, but again, I love these sci-fi concepts, I love the mystery, I love how horrifying this creature was in the first 2/3 of the movie before we found out exactly what she was. I do think that this cuckoo creature became a little bit less scary once you found out exactly what she was. But either way, I really did enjoy the ride that this movie took me on, and I had fun watching it, which apparently saying fun is a bad word when it comes to film criticism, but, you know, if it's a crime to be entertained, then put me in jail, I guess, because I've been entertained by a lot of films as of recently, including Trap, including Cuckoo, including, you know, all the other films that I talked about, even Maxine. I did have fun watching Maxine. It's not a crime to have fun in a movie, as some of the comments in the comment section down below, especially of my Trap video, may tell me. I had a blast with this movie, although I do understand that this movie is really weird, and weird movies are not going to be for everybody. And so if it was your thing, let me know in the comment section down below what you thought of Cuckoo. I'm very curious to hear how this movie divides audiences, as it seems like everything just constantly will divide audiences no matter what. And so if you loved it, let me know what you thought. If you hated it, also let me know what you thought. I'm very curious to see why you were not as entertained by this movie as I was. But either way, those are just going to be my thoughts on Cuckoo. And if you did enjoy this review, make sure you guys leave a like and subscribe to the channel to see more reviews just like this one. I have a whole bunch of reviews out on the channel. Of course, I talked about House of the Dragon Season 2, which just came to an end, which is also very divisive amongst a lot of fans, which, God, I can never predict the reactions at people after watching some of these things. Just crazy. And so check out that video, check out the other videos that I have here on the channel, and like I said, comment down below, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and see more reviews just like this one. And I hope to see you all in my next one, which will be Alien Romulus. I cannot wait for that.